Pro wrestling is an enigma of a medium. It is a scripted event that is simultaneously convincing its audience that it's real with outlandish stunts and choreography, while making it clear that it's scripted with its theatrics, instantly recognizable characters, and storylines that are truly unique to pro wrestling in every way. This blurring the line between fiction and reality means that pro wrestling can convey a story in a way that most other mediums cannot. It is this uniqueness of the medium that has garnered the millions and millions of hardcore pro wrestling fans. However, a stigmatism exists around pro wrestling, with many seeing it as illegitimate due to the fact that it's scripted, writing off their performances because it's fake. This mindset has existed for years, but for some reason is still prominent despite the increase of television programs that are scripted yet pose as reality. But why does this stigma exist? This mindset will hopefully be dispelled within this program as we investigate modern pro wrestling and discover the reality of pro wrestling. To understand modern pro wrestling, we must first recognize how pro wrestling has evolved over the years. Wrestling, in a very basic form, has existed since the ancient Romans, with two gladiators competing to wrestle the other to the ground. This continued for generations, with pro wrestling resembling more Olympic, amateur wrestling, focusing more on two athletes legitimately struggling to pin their opponent's shoulders to the mat or submit their opponent with a series of holds and submissions. It was only in the 1920s when wrestling started to include stage theatrics, or kayfabe. Wrestlers and bookers began to focus more on having predetermined results of matches, focusing more on choreographed holds and slams that weren't intended to hurt. It was here that it was determined that spectators were more interested in seeing a guaranteed entertaining match with huge choreographed sequences, known as spots, rather than legitimate contest between two competitors. While this was a major advent in pro wrestling was still a relative niche in terms of other mediums and entertainment, not holding the same audience as other major sporting events like football or mediums like film. It was only in the introduction of television in the 50s and cable in the 80s that made pro wrestling a media phenomenon and led to pro wrestling's next major change. The 80s is when wrestling became huge, brother. Wrestling became more readily available to a new audience at this time through television programs like the WWF Wrestling Classic and World of Sport for all you Giant Hestex fans. It even became more popular through the introduction of pay-per-view events in America, like the very first WrestleManias, SummerSlams, and WCW Starrcades. This resulted in a huge surge in popularity for pro wrestling, especially amongst children, as the colourful aesthetic of pro wrestling very much complemented the He-Man, Ninja Turtles, and Transformers style of 80s television. This was the main reason that wrestling changed in the 80s to a more cartoonesque style. In previous generations, wrestlers were just athletes in tights, most of them portrayed as strong heroes known as faces, or dastardly or dominating villains known as heels. Through this heel and face dynamic, pro wrestling allowed for one of its most interesting mechanics, the turn. In most other forms of storytelling, protagonists and antagonists rarely change to the other side of the spectrum of morality. But in pro wrestling, characters would turn heel or face to help tell stories in many different ways and help to develop their characters further. However, with the 80s and the rise of the then WWF, wrestling changed from portraying athletes to portraying colourful characters to help these wrestlers, and wrestling as a whole, become easily identifiable with its audience. These characters definitely matched the ridiculousness of the 80s, as this era introduced a taxman, a staff sergeant, a former prison guard, a millionaire, and whatever the Ultimate Warrior was. It was in this era that garnered the meteoric rise of Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Jake the Snake Roberts, Andre the Giant, Sting, Ric Flair, and the Ultimate Warrior. Wrestling in the 1980s was definitely targeted more to children, so it was only natural that wrestling would evolve with its audience, and with the media in general, as audience tastes changed as television transitioned into the 90s. The 1990s is when television, including pro wrestling, became R-rated. The 90s were a time of plaid, grunge, and attitude. Gone were the days of keytars and shoulder-padded jackets, and in came in-your-face attitude that characterized music, film, and television. This was made abundantly clear by the popularity of acts like Limp Bizkit and Kid Rock that were clearly products of their time. Wrestling was not exempt from this change in the media. As 80s wrestling was targeted towards more children, it was only natural that wrestling would change with its aging audiences. With the debut of the New World Order on July 7th, 1996, wrestling changed attitude with the brash, in-your-face style that was popular in late 90s television. Gone were the bright-coloured cartoony characters of the 80s, and in came dark colours, jeans, and sunglasses. It was at this time that the nature of face and heel changed forever. In the 80s, wrestling heroes were telling their fans to eat their vitamins, drink their milk, and say their prayers, while wrestling heroes in the 90s were swearing, giving middle fingers, drinking beer by the gallon, and attacking their employers very regularly. Wrestling storylines also climatized to the media of the 90s. 90s television was characterized as car crash TV, as the programming at this time was based on R-rated content. This content included strong language and content of a sexual nature. An easy analogy of this is if 80s wrestling was He-Man, Ninja Turtles, or Transformers, then 90s wrestling was Jerry Springer, Beavis and Butthead, Cops, or South Park. Wrestling storylines dealt at this time with infidelity, pregnancy, and a whodunit mystery angle about Steve Austin getting hit with a car. These storylines were so ridiculous and yet so entertaining at this era was the most popular for the WWF and WCW. 90s media was also very enthusiastic about being extreme. The anti-establishment attitude of the 90s ironically resulted in the popularity of alternative extreme sports like skateboarding and snowboarding. This mindset was also implemented in pro wrestling with the rise of hardcore wrestling and ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. In this era, matches usually included the use of weapons like chairs and kendo sticks, as well as hardcore stunts like ladder high drops and moves being performed on tables and barbed wire. This time in wrestling also gave more focus to gimmick matches that had different stipulations or victory stipulations than the normal pinfall or submission match. This is the time in wrestling where you would see ladder matches, the Hell in a Cell, cage matches, and just about anyone getting put through a table. This era in wrestling saw the rise in popularity of stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Kane, the NWO, the Dudley Boys, the Hardys, D-Generation X, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. However, the advent of the 2000s required a further evolution in the style of pro wrestling due to a change in circumstances and style of media. To gain further insight on this transition of wrestling from the 80s to the 90s, I consulted an expert, Jay Hunter of OSW Review, who you can find at oswreview.com.
Hi, I'm Jay Hunter of OSW Review. How wrestling changed from the Hulkamania era to the Attitude Era. There's about a 6-year gap between those time periods, known as the New Generation Era, characterised by a major downsizing of the company, low ratings, poor storylines, and a slow rebuilding phase. In 1992, the steroid scandal hit, causing a mass exodus of stars. That same year, a very public sexual harassment lawsuit, and in 1994, Vince McMahon went on trial for distributing steroids, generating massive negative press. WWF were floundering, but in 1996, their main competition, WCW, struck gold with the New World Order storyline, which dropped the passé neon cartoony presentation in favour of a gritty, reality-based adult product. It was wildly successful, so WWF aped this with even greater success. And with the crowning of megastar Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Attitude Era was born.
In the mid-2000s, the brash 90s in-your-face style of media gradually and thankfully faded out of prominence within most medias. Generation X style of media fading out of popularity, along with Linda McMahon, the wife of the owner of the now WWE Vince McMahon, running for Senate, resulted in the WWE and wrestling in the mainstream to clean up their product and remove many of the controversial and edgy subject matter that was prominent in the 90s era of wrestling. This transition into a PG era of sorts resulted in wrestling in the mainstream having to up their match quality by introducing and parading pro wrestling styles that were underrated in the mainstream of professional wrestling. In the mid-2000s, MMA promotions like the UFC became more popular amongst a wider audience. This resulted in wrestlers practicing in legitimate martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kickboxing to help incorporate smooth, crisp, technical mat wrestling into the matches, along with legitimate submissions and hard-hitting strikes to help introduce a new dynamic into their matches and to provide a different style of wrestling than the average mainstream wrestling fan was used to. This introduction of the practice of legitimate martial arts also brought a character element to many wrestlers. Practicing legit martial arts allowed for wrestlers to portray themselves as a legitimate fighter, which is relatively unheard of at the time. This helped provide an interesting dynamic in pro wrestling by providing a seemingly real fighter in this world of fake wrestlers. The mid-2000s also provided another major change in the dynamic of pro wrestling. The WWE and wrestling in the mainstream has always been touted as the land of the giants. This is due to the fact that wrestling in the mainstream usually reserved a spot in the main event for a physically larger wrestler than a smaller performer, always looking for a new Goliath to parade rather than a David. From Hulk Hogan to Brock Lesnar, Andre the Giant to the Big Show, Diesel to the Great Khali, mainstream pro wrestling has always had a spotlight for the big guy. It was at this time, however, that more of a focus was put on a smaller wrestler, as many fans preferred to see the different elements that are brought to a match by a smaller wrestler. Smaller wrestlers could perform high-flying maneuvers and spots that the more mobile, larger wrestlers could not. Smaller wrestlers were also more capable of high work rate, technical or high-flying wrestling, which allowed more of a fast-paced match and for many, a more entertaining match. This dynamic of smaller wrestlers with the already established bigger wrestlers allowed for the rise of smaller wrestlers in the main event of pay-per-views like Rey Mysterio, CM Punk and AJ Styles. A focus was put on hard striking wrestlers and technical wrestling in the matches of this era and led to the cementing of stars like AJ Styles, CM Punk, John Cena, Randy Orton, Daniel Bryan and Rey Mysterio. Now you might be asking yourself, why did we just go through the history of a generations old sport so quickly? And I swear to God there's a point to all this. We did this to show how previous generations essentially created modern wrestling. Modern wrestling is made up of many of the conventions of previous eras of wrestling, as it features its performers portraying characters within storylines that feature multiple styles of wrestling that feature within the dynamic of varying sizes of wrestlers and the use of gimmick matches to aid in its storytelling. This shows the complexity of pro wrestling by displaying the importance and evolution of its storytelling mechanics and dynamics. Further evidence that pro wrestling is truly nothing like any other medium. Now that we know what pro wrestling is today, we now know it's more than just muscular men slapping each other. We know the complexities of pro wrestling, and we must recognize the amount of effort that is put in by these performers and the writers in a pro wrestling production. To encompass a match into a storyline, while also making an entertaining match that tells its own story through ring psychology, may take more effort than any other medium or sporting event similar, in my opinion. Combine this effort with the real risk of injury from competing, and wrestlers should be getting much more respect for how much effort they put in for the sake of entertainment. But despite the effort that is put in, pro wrestlers aren't seen as athletes or performers, due to many writing off their stunts and bumps as unimpressive due to the sport being quote-unquote fake. These performers may even perform 6 times a week in an event that is equatable to running a marathon, and yet aren't given the respect they deserve for the effort they put in. This got me thinking about this problem from a wrestler's perspective. What does an actual wrestler think about this idea that wrestling doesn't matter because it's quote-unquote fake, and how would they try to change that mentality? How has injury affected their personal lives, and how do people in their lives react when they tell them they're a pro wrestler? To find out more about this subject, I went direct to the source and interviewed 2 of Pro Wrestling Ulster's best wrestlers, Christopher Tiberius Banks III and Tucker. How do people react when you tell them you're a wrestler?
You usually get one of 2 reactions. They'll either sort of just laugh it off and say, oh, like Hulk Hogan, and like, sure, why would you want to do that for? It's fake. Or you get people who are sort of remember like the Hulk Hogan sort of era, like from being kids, and it brings them back to that time frame. And they'll kind of be more inquisitive, not really impressed. Yeah. Like, you'll very rarely get somebody who's impressed by it, but you'll just get somebody who's just inquisitive, and they'll just continue to ask you questions.
I was actually thinking about that myself. If you said to just an old person, I'm a pro wrestler, then they would either be interested or they would just write it off.
Yeah, like I recently started a new job about 6 weeks ago, but one of the fellas that I work with, I used to work with a couple of years ago. Right. So by the time I'd started the job, he'd already told everyone that I was a wrestler. So the first day I came in, every single person that stopped me was like, I hear you're a wrestler. So what does that mean? Like, you know, what do you do? Like, is it real? Like, do you actually hit each other? You know, and it's like, it's the same questions just over and over again.
there is that mindset that people just write off going, oh, it's fake.
Yeah.
What's the point? If you could change somebody's mindset towards wrestling.
I don't really think you can,
Really?
to be honest. Yeah, if somebody has that impression wrestling's fake, they're always going to think wrestling's fake. You can get them to watch a fantastic match, but at the end of the day, they're still going to say, yeah, but that was fake.
Yeah.
I mean, what I don't really try to concentrate on people who don't like wrestling. What I try and do is please the people who do like wrestling, because that's where we're going to get the most appreciation out of what we do. The people who already have respect for it.
You might as well target already
exactly,
target
yeah.
established audience. But it is interesting where people watch TV shows or soap operas even,
Yeah.
that are essentially the same thing, that are scripted, but as soon as they see something that is written like it's real,
Yeah.
that isn't, it's crazy.
It
They
is. I think
can't
it's.
understand it.
I think people are still sort of stuck in that mindset of like back in the 70s and 80s when it claimed to be real.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas now the WWE is under no illusions that they're not a real sport.
They put out shows showing how it's not
Yeah, like they do now, like the documentaries and stuff, and they release all the footage of the guys sitting backstage having a laugh with each other. Everybody knows that it's not real, but it's that sort of, I think it was Damon O'Connor called it oh my god, I can't remember what he called it.
It's fine.
Suspension of disbelief.
Right, yeah.
So everybody knows that it's fake, but for like 5 minutes, you're willing to forget that it's fake.
I don't like saying like scripted or fake.
Yeah.
The term, I say make it sound more legitimate as stage theatrics.
Yeah, and like there are other guys who say, I think it was Raven and stuff, who said about like it's like choreographed stunt work just done live.
That is pretty accurate.
And then other guys who've described it as like modern dance with stunts and stuff. So I don't really think it is fair to call it fake, because nobody does claim that it is real anymore. You know,
That is
everybody
very old,
knows.
man. There is that idea of like, oh, they're not really getting hurt, so what's the point? Have you ever like seriously gotten hurt? That like,
Yeah, quite a few times. I've had scary ones that weren't serious, and serious ones that weren't scary.
tell me about the time you dislocated your jaw.
Yeah, Terry Thompson punched me so hard in my face to eliminate me from a rumble that he dislocated my jaw. And where we were having the show at the time, the backstage area was like down the corridor and up a flight of stairs.
Okay.
Whenever I got back to the backstage area and I popped my jaw back in, everybody in the locker room said that they had heard the shot. And I was like, this is like 100 meters away. But there's other times, like I took a bit of a box to pile driver once and landed square on the top of my head and couldn't move for quite a while after that. That was a culture night.
And Austin and Owen.
Sort of, yeah. It wasn't quite as bad as that, but it was like in a multi-man tag match. So straight after that, I knew that something was wrong and I couldn't move. But then Tucker came in and hit a shooting star press, and as he was trying to get off after the pin, I sort of tried to whisper to him that I couldn't move, but there was like 1,000 people at Culture Night, so there was just no way that he was going to hear me, and it ended up that he tried to kick me and roll me out of the ring, but again I couldn't move, so I just hit the floor. The worst was probably the arm break.
Oh yes, you done.
So the part just here where the actual ligaments attach onto the elbow, that broke clean off. So that sort of, I ended up, Curtis, who was in the ring with me at the time, drove me to hospital afterwards. I was in a back slab for I think about 2 weeks, and I was in a sling for about 3 months. I had to go through physiotherapy for a long time. Like I couldn't even grip anything. I couldn't open a door with that hand. I couldn't hold a fork or a knife or anything with it. So stuff does happen. But again, that was something that wasn't anyone's fault. That was just an accident. The scar that I have under my eye, that is Curtis's fault. Curtis just elbowed me square in the face and hit me so hard the skin just broke and bust open. But you know, there's no hard feelings. I've hit him as hard as he's hit me.
I suppose it is professionalism, can't really get mad.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
No problem. Thank you.
So, how do people react when you tell them you're a pro wrestler?
A lot of people sort of like it, or kind of like, what? You know, double take it a wee bit and sort of. You tend to find a lot of people once upon a time have watched wrestling in their life at some stage, whether it's Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin or Jan Haystacks or whatever. I think the older generation sort of tend to go with the giant haystacks answer, and you're like, yeah, well, it's evolved a lot now from what it was. It's completely different now, obviously.
But do you get the idea of like people who go like, oh, why would you do that? Sure, it's fake, isn't it?
Yeah, literally that's like the second part of the question. So probably say, oh, you do the wrestling. Is it not fake?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much a two-parter. So
Because there is that mindset when you, like, even as a fan, if you go, yeah, I like wrestling, they go, you know, that's for kids, like, it's fake. Like, if you could change that mindset, people's going, writing it off, going, oh, that's fake. Do you do that?
pretty easy way to do it is just say, well, come down and train and see how you get on, and take a bump in the ring and see how fake it is then. You know, it used to annoy me when I was younger, but then just when I was in school, a guy used to always say to us about it, and we said to him, look, we'll pay you in, bring you down to the training centre, let you try it out. He was like the chief hard man when we were in school, like, and he took a bump on the ring, and actually the first bump you have to take back whenever I was training was on just the mats, and his eyes nearly came out of his head. And I think ever since that, like, he never ever spoke bad of it ever again. You know what I mean?
So have you ever, like, you're doing like stunts, like it's essentially stunt work, but
Yeah, a lot of it you're sort of obviously putting your body on the line a lot of the time. It hurts. A lot of the time you get away with, when you're actually wrestling a show, when you're good crowds and your adrenaline's going, you get away with a lot of stuff. Sometimes you get hit with something and you'll be like, whoa, where's the adrenaline? That really hurt. But it's usually the next day you wake up and you feel like you've been in a real fight, basically. You know what I mean?
have you ever had like a injury or something that's affected you in like in your personal life or?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago now, I tore a cartilage in my ACL and dislocated my patella, so pretty much done the knee in as good as I could do it in. And it required surgery. So I actually, when I went to speak to the surgeon the first time, he had said that knee had actually dislocated before on 2 occasions, but the way my quadricep sat on the bone was the only reason I could still walk around and kind of. So I remember having it. That same knee had went on me once or twice before, but I kind of took a week off training and was, oh, it's fine. But obviously there was underlying issues there, and then eventually a third injury on it was the one that broke my camel's back, so I had to get the surgery.
But it is interesting how like people will see like a television show or something that's clearly scripted,
Yeah.
but when they see something that's scripted, but it's scripted like it's real, they just don't understand. They're like, oh, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like what's that show that everyone's into? Is it Walking Dead?
Aye.
So I don't actually really watch it, like, but I assume it's to do with like zombies and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And people are all like over the internet like, oh, such and such died, and I was crying, and it broke my heart. And I'm kind of going,
See a
you know,
guy,
like, if I turn around to them and go, you do know it's fake, you know, it's kind of
Yeah.
it's kind of the exact same argument. You know
like
what I
to
mean?
see a guy get hit with a bat and there's makeup for his eye coming out. It's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
oh my god. But you see a guy get like power bombed through a ladder and they're like, sure,
Yeah.
that's fake.
Yeah, that's actually happening.
Yeah.
We don't have stunt doubles, unfortunately.
You have doctors in the back who'll maybe stable up your head, but you're going to the hospital.
Yeah, pretty much.
Thanks very much for talking.
Yes, no worries, buddy.
If you would like to see any more of Christopher Tucker, you can find event information on the Pro Wrestling Ulster website, or you can catch Tucker in the WWE United Kingdom Championship Tournament in January on the WWE Network. Like these performers have said, many of the moves and stunts that are performed can cause injury that have a very serious impact on a wrestler's health and personal life. These injuries are frequent in most wrestlers' careers. Just take a look at the injury list in WWE alone in the last 2 years. Cesaro suffering a torn rotator cuff. John Cena was injured with a similar shoulder injury, as well as a broken nose from a knee to the face. Sami Zayn also tore his rotator cuff, while the architect Seth Rollins tore his MCL and his ACL in a match in Ireland. Ireland's own Finn Balor had to relinquish the Universal title due to suffering a labrum tear in his shoulder from a running powerbomb into the barricade. And Enzo Amore suffered a concussion from his head bouncing off the mat in a match with the Vaudevillains. These injuries may be temporary, but they did have a real effect on the performers' professional and personal lives, and recent injuries for some superstars have been more permanent. 2015 and 2016 has seen many wrestlers being forced to retire from competitive action due to their injuries. Fan favourite Yes Man Daniel Bryan had to retire due to his multiple sustained concussions that would have threatened his life if he continued to compete. The icon Sting was deemed unable to compete due to a back injury he suffered in a match with Seth Rollins. Keep in mind that all these serious injuries took place within the last 2 years. While this does show the frequency and regularity of injury for wrestlers, if we look to the past, we can see that injury in pro wrestling has had more dire effects on a wrestler's well-being. One of the most harrowing incidents of a wrestler getting injured to me is the injury that ended the late great Hayabusa's career. Hayabusa was a legendary masked Japanese wrestler known for his lucha libre and high-flying wrestling style. In a match with Mamoru Sasaki for FMW Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling in October 2001, Hayabusa suffered a career-ending injury when he landed on his head from losing his footing on a middle rope springboard moonsault. This minor slip-up cracked 2 of his vertebrae and left him paralysed for the rest of his life until his death in March 2016. I think this injury is particularly harrowing and sobering to think about, as it's one minor mistake on a move he performed probably 100 times, and it affected his life in one of the most severe ways possible. Now imagine you're a pro wrestler, keeping these injuries in your mind but still continuing to compete, to entertain, and then someone completely discards the sacrifice you make to entertain because it's quote-unquote fake. Imagine how insulted you would be. These performers and wrestling as a whole deserve more respect than that. Pro wrestling's uniqueness can never be overstated, an art form that blurs the line between fiction and reality, with moves that are designed to be safe, but with the real risk of injury looming, portraying itself as a legitimate sport, but featuring storylines that are comparable to a soap opera, parading itself as an athletic sport filled with eccentric, exciting characters, death-defying moves, and matches that make the Thunderdome from Mad Max look like a playground. Wrestling is zany, wrestling is serious, wrestling is fast-paced, wrestling is slow and methodical, wrestling is a stunt show, wrestling is a drama, wrestling is a gritty, realistic sport, wrestling is a ridiculous fiction, wrestling is a lot of things. But above all, pro wrestling is real. Well, kinda, but you know what I mean.